Hey folks, this is Dust and I am back to vlogging here as I did release another video actually just a few days before this one on a pilot for a new series I'm testing out on map strategy, so please do check that out if you haven't already and give me some feedback so I can see that's a series that I'm going to continue or not, as I am trying to branch out and do more content nowadays since I am kind of doing this full time for now between commentating games and creating content for CSGO. So definitely, like I said, please give me some feedback on that. But now I'm getting back to my state of NA CSGO vlog series. In this particular video, and in today's topic, we'll be talking about Liquid and their addition of flowsick and how things have gone thus far since then, and kind of how I feel about it, of course. Now, before I go any further, obviously, I got some cool new graphics here that you see, which I am really, really happy about, though I think I still need to tweak maybe the font of the topic title and things like that. But other than that, it's really cool to finally have like a nice graphic to use for these vlogs. So I want to give a shout out to LeeWorezGaming, who did this overlay for me, as well as a lot of other graphics that I use for my live streaming. So if you're interested, you're trying to get into creating content or making videos, or you're getting into streaming, or just whatever you need graphical work done, definitely give a shout out to LeeWorezGaming. You can get him on Twitter at LeeWorezGaming, or email him at LeeWorezGaming@gmail.com, and also check out his portfolio over at behance.net/LeeWorezGaming. I'll put all these links in the description below to make this really easy for you if you're looking for graphics work. But this is my first time using his stuff on this vlog series, so I figured I'd give him a shout out in case anybody out there was looking for some stuff and needed a good recommendation. There's one for you with LeeWorez. But now let's get into the meat of what this video is supposed to be, which is, like I said, talking about the new Liquid with the addition of flowsick. He was at first joining as supposedly a stand-in for the Gfinity Spring 2 event, but it's been recently announced that he is going to be a permanent member of the team going forward. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what this means, as well as just talking about Liquid at large, about some of the issues that I've seen them face over time and what I'm still kind of seeing in their games today, and what they could possibly do in the short term or long term to try to get better as a team. Because honestly, when you look at a brand like Liquid, you really do think that they should be one of the top teams in NA. They should be challenging for the #1 spot, or at least somewhere in the top 3. But it seems like, teams like Cloud9 and Nylum and some of these other teams seem to be much ahead of them. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that now, but I just feel like with that type of backing, they should be able to progress much further than where they're at right now. So to talk just really quick about flowsick joining the team, I guess there's really no theoretical difference between when he came in as a stand-in and when he came in now as a permanent member. I mean, they've been playing with him now for probably a month or so, and so as far as like his impact on the team, I don't think that necessarily changes, but maybe it's at least a little bit more stability. They're not trying anyone else out. There's no thoughts about anybody else, so it seems like they're firmly confident in flowsick as a choice, and so that may help with like stability, or in the back of your head, confidence if you're flowsick, that you're not on the chopping block, or that you don't need to prove yourself to stay on the team. You already have the permanent position, so it can help psychologically maybe. But we can talk about what does flowsick add to the team. Well, he's pretty much the direct replacement for Daps, right? Daps was let go after FACEIT Stage 1 finals earlier in May, I think that was. I think it was still this month, as we're at the end of May now. And they made that change, basically leading up through Gfinity Spring 2, which was, I think, 2 weeks after FACEIT or something like that. So it was really, really close together. And, Daps was the in-game leader for quite some time for this particular team, even dating back to when they were Denial, playing at the Season 17 ESCA LAN event long before Dren had ever joined the team. And even once Dren joined the team as the Opper, Daps still kind of remained in place as the in-game leader. But there's a couple instances where they kind of swapped back and forth on who was leading, and I think that Dren definitely still had a lot of hands-on with Daps. As far as leadership goes, and I think he and D-Mode, the coach for Liquid, had a lot of coaching to do as far as trying to get Daps up to speed to be a good in-game leader, and so I think there was a lot of influence there still, even when Daps was officially the IGL, that I think Adren and some others really had a lot of input on how things happened, especially maybe with freeze time talk, or maybe even mid-round adjustments. I think that there was still a lot of outside influence besides just Daps being like the firm leader. But if you just step away from the whole leadership issue, which I'll talk about in a minute, and you just look at the role in game from a fragging perspective, Daps did play kind of that support slash lurker role for this team alongside Fugly, who's kind of the other passive rifler in the team who also will take up some lurking and support positions, where Nitro and Elige were the more, aggressive entry fraggers, and Adren, of course, typically opping if they had one. If not, he's just rifling, floating back and forth, usually in the middle of the map. So if you look at it that way, then flowsick is kind of a direct replacement from that passive rifling, kind of lurking perspective. In many cases, you will see, Fugly and flowsick maybe on opposite ends of the map, kind of solo, while the other three travel in a pack. This is especially prevalent on maps like Dust 2, where you kind of have Fugly outside long A, flowsick lurking the B tunnels. In some cases, they're together, like on Inferno when they're trying to take apartments control, you'll see those two together, where, Nitro and Elige will work kind of be together quite a lot, trying to get entries there, though Elige will certainly kind of swap over and also help get picks at mid and stuff like that as well. But you get my point. He is a passive rifler with the ability to lurk. That's kind of what he was doing with Nylon before he got dropped for that team when they picked up Synphis. And he is playing a very similar role for Liquid. So, pretty good direct replacement role-wise, I guess you could say. Also, I will say this. flowsick, 24 years old, a bit more mature, does have a lot more experience underneath his belt, at least within the NA scene, playing CS at a NA professional level. He played a lot of Pro 1.6 within the NA scene before CSGO. And in CSGO, he's been at the invite level for quite some time, on and off. I mean, he's been playing at the invite level, or now, I guess, professional level of ESEA since, like, Season 13. So that's, pretty early 2013 type stuff there, dating back pretty far. So on a team that had so much youth, and we'll talk about that more in just a second, especially, I guess, now we'll just talk specifically about Daps, who was a very young guy, not a lot of professional CS experience, and he was the in-game leader, trying to lead the team with a very small or very limited background of having professional experience in the game. And I think that certainly hurt. And then when, Adren kind of took over leadership on a permanent basis once Faceit Stage 1 came around, it's almost as if that's really kind of lost its value. If he wasn't going to be the in-game leader anymore, then all he could be was just kind of a support and lurker role player. And if you can find a better player that's more skilled and has more experience, then it just makes sense that you would make that change. So overall, I think bringing in flowsick could be somewhat considered an upgrade as far as a fragging perspective goes and an experience perspective goes, and the type of plays that he makes, being a pretty smart player. I think that you can kind of consider that an upgrade. But with that said, let's kind of move forward. Let's start talking about some of Liquid's issues, and we're going to talk a little bit about this leadership and youth thing that I've kind of been hinting at already when I was talking about Daps leaving and flowsick coming in. So when you watch Liquid play, I'm going to just talk about the inexperience and youth first with some of their personnel, then I'll get more into some of the mechanics and fundamentals they seem to have issues with. But when you look at just the roster, let's just go player by player really quick and talk somewhat about this inexperience and possibly also immaturity. They picked up Elige not too long ago in replacement of Naf. Naf was also another really young player with a lack of experience, but was, pretty flashy aggro guy, versatile, could op, could rifle, pretty aggressive rifler. And they just replaced him with another very young aggressive rifler in Elige. He's only 17 years old, still in high school. He started only just in January of this year playing at a North American professional level. His first real LAN, I think, was actually at ClutchCon in about late January. And that was also the first time he had ever played against like a European team on LAN. I think they played a couple of best of ones, or at least one best of one against a European team. I think they did play a best of 3 against Fnatic, because I think they upset CLG and they were on the same side of the bracket as Fnatic. I think they played them in a best of 3 there, but kind of got crushed, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how it was. But regardless, after that, he played with Elevate for a little bit longer within the North American scene, but then, like I said, he got picked up to go play with Liquid just like not too long before they, in May, like earlier this month, went to go play at Faceit Stage 1, which is first time in Europe, first time, really playing against a lot of international teams in one sitting. And so this kid is very young, very inexperienced. Yes, he has what seems to be a pretty good raw talent for being an aggressive rifler and having pretty good aim. But definitely, lacks experience for sure. I've heard some issues maybe with immaturity or, losing composure when things aren't going well, kind of mentally checking out of games. But the kid's 17 years old. You can't expect him to be this seasoned veteran who can, keep his mind right in adversity all the time. I mean, obviously, he's going to take time to grow, take time to learn. He seems to have some raw talent, but he's not going to overnight, literally, because he just started playing his first international lands this month that I'm making this video. And then even before then, he only had about 5 or 6 months worth of professional experience within just the NA scene. It's going to take time to mold this player. So that is one issue that Liquid faces is they have so many players that are in this same boat that have not been playing professional CS for very long, so they're very just raw, and so therefore they sometimes make plays or make mistakes that veterans would not make because they just know better. They just are a little bit more aware of what's going on and what needs to be done. And especially like in post-plant situations with, not peaking as much or not overextending, or even in certain cases just taking one-on-one duels that are not favorable. And we'll get more into this later with their mechanics of the Liquid team overall. Now you look at Nitro. This kid, also only 19 years old. He's in college, I believe, at LSU, I think, maybe. I don't know. I know he's from Louisiana. I see him wearing LSU shirts all the time on a stream, so I'm going to assume he probably goes there. He has a little bit more experience than Elige. I mean, he started playing with iBuyPower as a kind of a fill-in, I guess, in November of last year. So he has, I guess, a couple of months on Elige. He played at DreamHack Winter with iBuyPower, and he also played at the Season 17 ESCA LAN with that team. And he, showed a lot of promise, a lot of potential in these particular games. And he almost got a permanent spot on iBuyPower if it wasn't for the fact that they kind of picked up Hiko to make a dream team. And so he kind of got the shaft and eventually joined Denial, which becomes what is now Liquid, in time to go play at Aspen in January for that team. Like I said, showed a lot of potential, has a lot of skill, another aggressive rifler next to Elige, essentially. But still, once again, very, very raw, very much young, and still lacks experience playing at a professional level in CSGO. And so you can kind of see the pattern I'm starting to build. But let me finish as I'll talk about Fugly, who's 20 years old. His first LAN at a professional level in CSGO was in fact in December, so a little bit more experienced than Elige, but not quite as much as Nitro, I guess. And this is when he was playing with the Denial lineup that is now Liquid, basically, when he was playing with like Daps and Naf and Shazam and some of these other guys, and they did quite well. He played really well, in fact, against Titan, Elevate, and C9 at that event. Showed a lot of promise. He was with the team when they went to Aspen in January. He also played at the Katowice qualifiers, the European qualifier, when they played against Flipside and Copenhagen Wolves. And, of course, Nitro was there, too, at this time. And he showed really good play against these teams, even though the team would wind up kind of losing some close games and wind up not qualifying for Katowice. And then, of course, he's been there with them ever since for Face It, Gfinity, all that good stuff. And so you can just see you have 3 players, all 20 or younger, 2 of them in their teens. Each of them only have about maybe 6 months worth of professional CSGO experience under their belt, and that's just within the NA scene. When you talk about traveling or playing as international teams, yes, Nitro had DreamHack Winter in Season 17 ESCA LAN, then Aspen, then the Katowice main qualifiers, Face It, and Gfinity. So it's like 6 events, I guess. Fugly, pretty much the same boat there. Elige, less than that. For all 3 players, they've either traveled overseas 3 times or less, and played in the European environment, like I said, for 3 events or less than that. And like I said, this is all within just the last 2 or 3 months that they've done this. So And then, or before Daps left the team, that's another player who was in the same boat as these other three. So you literally had a Dren, the only player with any experience or any type of veteran status on the team, and you had 4 kids, basically. I mean, I think Daps is also, like, in his late teens or early 20s in college or something like that. And like I said, he was in the same boat. Yes, now they have flowsick, who's a bit older, has a bit more experience, but even flowsick doesn't really necessarily have that much I guess he does been in the professional NA CSGO scene for some time, but as far as playing internationally against, big elite European teams, I mean, I know he played at the season 13 ESCA LAN. Like I said, this is like early 2013, I believe, with Denial, like one of the Denial lineups where he was playing with like Automatic and I think Jay Mitchell and some of these other guys. And that was like early 2013. And then after that, you don't see him play against international teams again, like up until now, I think. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe he did play with somebody else along the way, but I feel like he's had a huge gap of time where he hasn't like been contending against international teams or competing in international tournaments. So I guess like the whole theme I'm trying to set here is that in the short term, Liquid was always going to be doomed, I guess, unless like all these players I mentioned, or 1 or 2 of them turn out to just to be complete superstars who were unaffected by inexperience, unaffected by jitters, unaffected by nerves, unaffected by having to adapt to a new environment against a new style of play, against a new caliber of opponent. It was always going to be a tough deal in the short term with so many young, inexperienced players on the team. And so that's just kind of a major point I wanted to make there. Going forward. Now let's talk a little bit about how this affects mechanics and how they actually play and why you see some of their results being kind of poor. Let's be completely honest. So first we could just like generally talk about their T sides really quick. So when you look at like Gfinity, because I don't want to get too much in the face at stage 1 because that was prior to flowsick, and so I kind of just want to maybe not really key in on that too much, though I think at that event they just got blown out by Fnatic, which was pretty much understandable since it was like Fugly and Fugly and Alicia's first time overseas, and I mean it's Fnatic. I mean you probably expect them to do a little bit better than what they did against Fnatic. Well, I think they only got 3 rounds out of 2 maps, but I mean I don't think we ever expected them to straight up beat Fnatic. But when you look at the immunity games, especially now in hindsight, when we saw how like badly C9 was able to beat immunity and how immunity wasn't able to do a whole lot at Gfinity, you'd expect Liquid to have been able to win that game. But honestly, some of their players that you'd expect them to play really well, like Nitro, like Elige, weren't showing up for that game. Like Nitro's potential seems to have like worn down a bit. Granted, he's in a much different situation than he was when he was in Pioneer Showless experience, because he had a bunch of players around him who were seasoned veterans who were very solid, like Swag, like AZK, like Skadoodle. Now he's got nothing like that around him anymore. Now it's just him, the youth, the young gun, next to 2 other youth young gun players. It's like there's no stable rock there for Nitro to lean up against, so to speak. Like he has to be the star, and he kind of has to be the rock for these other 2 really young kids who have even less experience than he does. So that's me kind of tapping back into this whole theme about youth and inexperience. But I'll kind of step away from that now and just kind of talk about Gfinity as well as some of the North American play that Liquid has had. And when you look at their T sides, I mean, they've been quite abysmal, if I'm 100% honest. I mean, you look at, Gfinity when they played against Vox, 0 rounds on T side against Vox Imanor after getting 9 on CT, which isn't that great, but it's at least somewhat respectable, but could get nothing done on T side, 0 rounds. You look at their game against Navi on Dust 2, only 2 rounds on T side, lost 13 in the first half. On Dust 2, that's really not a figure you can work with. Then against NIP, obviously they got crushed by NIP just in general. I think once again maybe only 2 or 3 rounds, maybe 3 or 4 rounds between 2 mats played against NIP, and they only got 1 T round on Inferno, and I think they just got completely crushed like 13 rounds from NIP on their T side on D2, so they didn't even get a chance to really play T side against NIP. They just kind of got crushed in general that best of 2 series. And this doesn't just sit against tier 1 European teams or like really good foreign teams. This extends even into their North American play, even sometimes against like lesser tier teams. So We'll start with their tier 1 team matches, though, when they've played C9 and Overpass. They were able to get 12 rounds on the T side, solid T side, but couldn't close the game. Only got one T round going into the next half. C9 able to rally those 13 rounds and win the game. Then you look at their match against Cash, against Luminosity, where they can only get one T round once again. Then even to Gfinity, kind of a tier 2 NA team, they get 11 rounds on CT side in the first half in an Inferno game. Good position. Then they can only come up with 2 rounds on T side. They can't close the game. And that's against like a tier 2 NA team. So there's really, their CT sides are generally pretty good against almost all North American teams. You've seen me list some of these examples where they got good CT sides. But they just can't close on T, it seems like, for whatever reason. And their T sides in general have been kind of rough. So why is this? Why is this the case? What is the problem? Why can't they get anything on T rounds? And we can approach this from a couple of different angles. And then we'll also talk a little bit about CT side, right? Because it's not as if it's flawless. On T sides, I was kind of watching some of their demos. That's what I've been doing lately, is watching demos from teams just to try to, increase my knowledge of how all the different teams play and things like that, and notice trends and all that good stuff. And I was watching some demos for Liquid in preparations for this video I'm making now, but also because I'll be, commentating some of their games for CVO and MLG and the Pro League, and as well as some of these like qualifiers and tournaments coming up. So I wanted to, brush up on them. And I watched, some of these games from Gfinity as well as some of these North American games. And when I watch them on their T side, and I'm going to give you like a couple of specific examples, and then I'll just kind of give some general ideas, is just generally speaking, there's many situations where I see players peaking in ways which, like, either they win the duel or they lose the duel, and like they just completely give up, like maybe not the round, but they definitely give up the man advantage to the CT team, which is always terrible when you're starting like 5 versus 4 or 4 versus 5 rather from Liquid's perspective, very early in a round or something like that. So sometimes there's just players who peak in ways in which no one can trade. There's no ability to kind of redeem or a frag or get revenge or whatever you want to call it. Just no trading ability. If you win the 1v1 duel, great. But if you don't, then you have no one to back you up, no ability to trade it back. And that obviously can become a huge problem. It just snowballs when that happens repeatedly in a round or repeatedly throughout a game. In some situations, you see them like over-peaking in post plants when they actually have a man advantage. This was really, I guess, more prevalent at Face It Stage 1 against like Fnatic in a couple of those games where they were actually getting sites executed, I think like that Mirage game, for instance. And but that still does happen occasionally on this team. And a couple specific examples of this is when I was watching the Na'Vi game on Dust 2 from Gfinity Spring Masters, the second one that just happened. There was just a couple of rounds where like Zeus or somebody was playing Cat, and they had 3 players Cat, but they would peek Zeus one by one and give him like 3 1v1s, and Zeus would win them. And then all of a sudden, Na'Vi has like a huge man advantage early in the round. Or they would take a weird engagement at mid, where someone in CT spawn once again just gets a bunch of 1v1 duels against people coming out of double doors mid, and they're not really peeking together or are being close enough together to be able to attack properly. It's almost as if either there's like miscommunication on the timing of a peak or when they should go, like someone thinks it's time to go but everyone else isn't on the same page, or maybe the player up front decides to go make a play when his teammates are too far behind. He miscalculated like where his teammates are at and how quickly they're going to be able to back him up. Just whatever. It's either miscommunication, not being on the same page, or a player not listening to a call, or not paying attention. Whatever the case may be, this happens quite often, and I saw it happen several times just against Na'Vi alone in that particular game I cited. And I also even saw this like against a tier 2 NA team, like against Gfinity on Inferno. You would see instances where like someone like a Liege was just out in the middle of nowhere mid. A guy from CT side picks mid, gets a Liege. No one's there to reclaim that. It's just kind of like being caught in exposed positions or challenging in ways that don't make sense, that there's no backup, there's no ability to trade. Heck, I saw one round where they attacked Banana against Gfinity, and they smoked all spools in CT spawn. They go to hit B, and there's one opper, it's Arya, playing on the top of spools over a smoke in a super exposed position, and they just keep feeding him op frags, and they just have no ability to trade him out and get rid of him and like get into the B bomb site. That's just like one round example, but you can just see kind of the trend that I'm setting here, or the kind of the general pattern I'm seeing, where it's just so many instances where like I kind of went like way into it on the Navi example, just, peaking in ways that are not favorable, are not tradable, or just not being on the same page as a team on the T side. And this could be simply because of the inexperience, mistakes being made, or maybe people just trying to be a hero, trying to prove themselves, trying to be the guy, the guy on the team, the star, or what have you, just forcing plays that don't need to be forced. Or it could go into the leadership of the team. And, I mean, with the Dren, honestly, it's one of those situations where he probably is the next best in-game leader out there next to Sean Garrett in the NA scene right now, just because there isn't very many in-game leaders. I know there's people like Peter who are like starting to try to do in-game leading. I know there's Finesse who has at times proved himself to be quite capable, but let's just face it, our in-game leader talent pool is quite limited in the North American scene. And it's one of those situations where Dren is kind of one of the next guys in line to be considered like one of the greater minds of NACS. But, I mean, let's face it, there's two really key issues here with this. One, it's already been cited several times by a Dren from his own mouth that he does not like having to be the Opper and being the IGL, okay? He doesn't like to do both. He has trouble because he has trouble like on T side with the Op trying to get picks or get entries or whatever, but then also trying to manage or direct traffic on all the other players and what they're doing on T side. And when you combine that with inexperienced players who are prone to making mistakes or doing things by themselves that need to be micromanaged, but he's too busy trying to do whatever he's trying to do to get a pick with the Op, and so he kind of gives them the freedom or whatever, and they screw up, then it's kind of on him for not being able to call properly while he's opping, or on the other guys for not waiting, not being patient, or not listening to calls, or being on the same page, whatever. So if that's a problem, then either A, it needs to be fixed by they should have picked up an opper, which to their credit, they did try to do. They did try to pick up Skadoodle, and it didn't work out, right? So they did try to go that route. They did try to get an opper to free Dren just to focus strictly on in-game leading and not worrying about opping, whatever. And as far as picking up another in-game leader goes, those options are quite limited as well. So it's almost as if they're just kind of stuck with this whole situation with the Dren opping and in-game leading. But not really, right? Because there was that option that a Dren, Fugly, and Nitro did have to pair up with Hiko and Skadoodle. And that would have solved a bunch of these problems that I'm telling you Liquid has. Like issues with inexperience and youth. Not enough veterans on the team. Not enough like rocks or stable players that you can rely on. That would have solved the issue with a Dren having to multitask opping and being an in-game leader. So in the short term, that was probably the better option. And I think that if they wanted quick success, or at least some of these players, because obviously a couple of these guys would have been left out of it, right? Like flowsick, who just joined the team, and like Elise, those guys would have been left out. Daps was going to be left out if they would have made this thing before Face It Stage 1, which was definitely up in the air at the time. And so if some of these guys, like I said, if they wanted to have the short-term success or the best chance for immediate success, then they definitely should have just figured things out with Hiko and Skadoodle, and that would have been the team that could have done it. But now they just have to focus on the long term, and it's going to take some time, as I've kind of stated with some of this inexperience issues. And the other thing I was going to say about a Dren's leadership is surrounding all of this, he's not used to having to do this. He is used to having a bunch of veterans alongside him to assist him, or players that he knows he can rely on not to make some of these mistakes or some of these peaks that I've been kind of referring to in some of these game examples. So when he played with on Dynamic and Counter-Strike Source, he just had a bunch of other veteran Source players around him. He didn't really have any youth or upcoming talents or raw people he had to mold. He just could lead a team full of experienced players. And this has always been the case in CSGO for him when he's played at a professional level, when Dynamic transitioned. Except, I guess, when he had like Swag and Kika, those were a couple of young guys at the time that they were on Dynamic. So you could make an argument there that was one point in time where he did have to deal with this a little bit. And guess what? That team didn't work out. So is that another example of how it doesn't work out? When you look forward from that, when he's playing on Curse, when he's playing with iBuyPower, once again, he typically has a roster full of other experienced players or smart players. He was kind of the secondary in-game leader today on iBuyPower when they had guys like AZK and Skadoodle. When you look back to Curse, he at least had, like I said, at the time, Anger And I think they had AZK as well at that time. And some of these other guys who were just kind of vets had been around the pro CS scene for a while, at least coming from Source and into CSGO. So I don't think he's used to having 3 and at one point 4 dudes on his team that all have like 6 months experience that he has to coach and micromanage more in order for them to be successful, to catch them up to speed at the tempo and pace of professional NACS, or just understanding the type of plays that have to be made and the ones that have to be avoided. And so I think that I think he has capable. He's a smart guy. He could probably coach these guys, but will he take the time to do so is the question. Maybe he is, and maybe they're just not responsive enough. Or maybe, like I said, it's just going to take time because of how young these guys are and the immaturity and things they're going to have to learn, and it will take time for them to develop. So basically, in the short term, it was always going to be this way, I think. I don't think there was a way in the short term they could have been great, unless Nitro's potential just kept swarming to like this massive proportions, and he became a rock player or whatever, or just a stable player. And Fugly honestly has played quite smart, to be honest, and he's done quite well for considering his experience level and youth and things like that. I thought he's played quite well. Elige hasn't quite lived up to the potential I saw in him in Elevate, but that doesn't mean that he can't. So, like I said, I think going long term, if these players develop properly, Liquid could be a force to reckon with later, but it may take several months to do so. And then kind of going back to some of these mistakes, even on the CT side, you can see instances where they're very uncoordinated on some of their retakes. I saw this against Nip on Dust 2 at Gfinity Spring 2. To sometimes, like, people, they're not timing their peaks properly whenever they want to retake a site. Typically on D2, when you're retaking, you kind of want your doors and window player to kind of come in simultaneously while a guy also comes in tunnels simultaneously. So you kind of have, like, this triple peaking pattern where everyone's peaking at once, and so it's causing the terrorists inside the site to have to worry about multiple angles at once. And like, that's theoretically like the most optimal way you would retake a site, not a guy going through window by himself dying. Now you turn a 3v3 into a 2v3, then you're also indecisive and hesitant on whether or not you want to retake or fall back and save. And you can see how the the lack of coordination, like we saw on T side with how they're peaking, can also be very, very harsh on them on the CT side when they're trying to retake sites. That was just kind of a note I missed there I wanted to throw in really quick. So another really big issue I haven't mentioned yet, and this is actually the last one before I wrap this up, is the fact that this team can't even commit to full-time CS, it seems like. Maybe now they can since it's the summer, but back when this team started kind of forming a couple of months ago, you got Elige, who's still in high school, 17 years old. You got Nitro, who I'm pretty sure is in college and has to deal with that and can't commit full-time to CS. Then you had Daps, who was in the same boat. I know he's gone now. Honestly, I don't know what flowsick's commitment abilities are. And then I'm pretty sure Fugly's also another young kid who was in school. He may or may not still be. I know it's summer vacation right now, so they probably have a couple of months now where they can really commit full-time. But before they couldn't. It was only a Dren who had literally quit his career, put everything on the line to be a full-time CS player and streamer, but no one else could or wanted to or was willing to take the risk to maybe take a semester off. Obviously, the timing was kind of poor because when they got the Liquid sponsorship, it was probably mid-semester, so you couldn't really expect people to quit midway through. You kind of have to wait for the semester to be over, then make that consideration to go full-time CS or not. Either way, if this team's going to work, they're going to have to all be able to commit to full-time to keep up with some of these other teams that are doing that. And obviously for Elige, this is going to be difficult now since he's in high school. You can't really expect the kid to take a year off of high school, whereas it might make sense to take a semester off of college or something like that if you really want to commit full time. So the fact that I wouldn't really blame each player has their own individual reasonings behind why they cannot commit full time to CS. And so I can't blame some of these kids that are in school on this team, but it does kind of stink that a Dren kind of went all out on this, but some of his teammates can't, and so you have like some who are fully committed and some who are not. Maybe not fully committed, because I think everyone wants to win and wants to commit as much time as they can, but as far as being able to take that step to be full-time CS players. And so hopefully that's a solution that they can work on going down the road, because in this situation where they have so much youth and inexperience, like being able to go full-time and like go really hard, they kind of need that to catch up, to get up to speed next to some of these other teams that are full of veterans that have done this crap for like 2-3 years in CSGO already. So that was basically just me touching a little bit on some of the issues I'm seeing with Liquid and what they can probably work on. Like I said, I think the bulk of it really just does come to the youth and inexperience, and the fact that like they just are going to have to rely on a long-term plan rather than a short-term success plan. It's going to take time to develop and mold some of these players, try to get them up to speed on, making smart plays and avoiding, unfavorable, peaking and trading positions where people aren't on the same page and can't trade properly. So basically they just need to, coach up and develop some of these players into just playing smarter CS, playing team CS, and the team needs to be on the same page. And Adren needs to either be more hands-on as a leader, or they need to figure something out with his issues being able to lead an op at the same time, or what have you. Hopefully they can figure all these things out, because they really should be a team that's contending for lands, continuing to be a top 3 NA team or top 4 NA team, to be able to qualify for some of these North American LAN events and be invited to future international events. They have the brand behind them. They have the support behind them. They have players with raw skill that could be developed if they so choose to be developed, and if maybe they do or do not have what it takes to be developed, we'll have to see in time. But we've definitely seen at least spurts of brilliance and potential out of some of these young guys on this team. Now, it may be an issue that there is just too much youth on the team at once, and they need more veterans, and some of these youth players need to go join teams that have more veterans and kind of split up the youth to make it easier for them to develop when they have a lot of players surrounding them that have the experience. Whereas on this team, they just surround each other in youth and inexperience. I don't know if that's just a bad environment or not. But I think if I keep going, I'll just kind of ramble. So I think I've got most of my ideas out there, and we'll just have to see how this team does. But other than that, please follow and subscribe and share if you enjoyed it. And like I said, I appreciate all the feedback and hope I have your support while I try to pursue this commentary thing full time for a little while. And yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. See you next time.